Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks to my patrons over at Patreon for joining up and supporting me in that way. That makes me feel really good and helps out financially, so I appreciate it. And also, thanks to those people who've been buying me coffees at the Buy Me a Coffee link up at the top of the main YouTube page. So if you're interested in doing either of those things to help support my channel, there are links to both of those in the description down below. And I'll put a couple of pictures of some recent projects that I made for my Patreon subscribers, so you can see a little bit of the content that I'm putting up there. So that being said, feel free to leave comments and suggestions in the comment section. I like that kind of stuff. I love discussions about tools and things. So I like the interaction here. So today I'm going to make what I'm going to call a slot ring, I think. It's a pretty simple kind of thick band with a slot cut in it and then a bezel set faceted stone right in the center of that. So let's get started on that. So I've laid out the materials I'm going to use in this particular project. For the band, I don't have any super thick sheet. The thickest I have is 18 gauge sterling here. And so I'm probably going to cut two pieces of it and solder them one on top of the other to achieve a thicker piece of sheet. Another option would be to cast an ingot out of some scrap and then pound it flat or roll it through the rolling mill till it's the thickness that you want. But I wanted to just go ahead and get this going today, so that takes a little more time, and I don't have the time today. So the other materials, I'm using 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, although I'm probably going to cut it in half. I don't have any 1/8 inch currently, so this will do. I just have to cut it a little shorter so I don't have to file so much off. And as always, I use hard silver solder. And then a lot of people ask me what my spray-on flux is. It's My-T-Flux that I get from Rio Grande. And it's similar to batter self-pickling flux if you can't get Rio Grande products where you're at. So let's see. So let me show you the stone I picked. It's a London Blue Topaz. Let's see how big he is. It's very pretty. It's a little oval one. It's almost lozenge shaped. It's a little bit more lozenge shaped than oval. Where'd my little ruler go? Okay, so let's get just a little estimate. Looks like he's about, well, I don't know, 6 millimeters long by, so he's probably 6 by 4-ish. 6 by 4, 6 by 4.5, somewhere in there. So, and I've kind of sketched out a little bit of a drawing. I hope you can see that. My goal here is to, like I said, cut two pieces of sheet, solder them together so they're thicker, and then I guess I'll probably use a jeweler's saw to cut out this notch here. So I'll have to drill a hole for a starter hole, and then we'll just cut it out while it's flat. And then we'll make it into a ring, and we'll solder the bezel in that I'll make for the stone. And I think I'll probably start with making the bezel for the stone. So that's our plan for plan of action for the day. And like I said, I'm going to cut a little piece here and trim it in half. Maybe not quite in half. So that should be fine. We'll make our bezel out of that. Oopsie. This particular blue topaz is what they call London blue, which is more of a darkish blue. The other kind of blue topaz you usually see is Swiss blue, they call it. The interesting thing about blue topaz is very little of it that's on the market is natural color. Much of it is they heat it and then they irradiate it to make the color fast. From what I understand, topaz is one of those stones that if it does have natural color, sunlight and UV radiation can cause it to fade over time in the stone. So, and a lot of the topaz that comes out of the ground is just colorless. So, but apparently if you heat it and then you irradiate it, it stays blue, or turns it blue and then keeps it blue. It's funny, a lot of stones are like that. There's like black onyx, apparently there's no actual natural solid black onyx that I've heard of. And so it's pretty much all dyed. Now, correct me if I've been misinformed about that, but I'm gonna have to invest in some new ones pretty soon here. Most of mine are looking pretty cruddy. All right. That never takes long on one that small. I really appreciate all the nice comments from all my regular commenters. I've been kind of having a grueling schedule doing these things, which I set for myself, but it makes it worth it when I get such nice compliments from you guys. And it really makes me happy when I hear that somebody, learned something valuable out of the video. It's always nice to hear. That's kind of my point here. I really need to work on getting this in frame. That looks pretty good. Now I need to make a little platform for the stone to sit on, since it's a faceted stone and it has the pointed pavilion on the bottom. And I typically use, I should have mentioned this in my materials earlier, sorry about that, some 18 gauge to make a couple of little rings that'll fit in there. I have more trouble making oval rings than I do round rings. Anymore, I generally just kind of free-form rings. Unless I want some really super uniform ones for a chain or for some other reason like that, and I can pull it off of a bail making pliers or some other round thing I've wrapped stuff around. Okay, we're still a little bit big there, so take a little bit out. We'll have to adjust the shape a little bit. This was the part I had the hardest time with making well, step bezels for faceted stones at first. Now we're just about there. Make sure it sits in there flat. Okay. Now we just have to make one more, probably. I've been making a lot of little tiny bezels lately and stuff. Maybe I need to make something huge and honking. Sometimes, if you're not careful, if you have them too tight, they'll sit at at an angle there, and then when you, after you solder them in, your stone won't sit nicely in there. And so it's always best if you can get them to sit in there snugly but flat. So if you need to take just a little more off in order to do that, it might be worth the trouble you have to face later on when you set the stone. I used to get a little impatient sometimes and rush it, and then I'd regret it later. Okay, so that one's a little looser than the other one, so I think I'll put this one on the bottom, like that, and then I'll plop this one on top. It's just kind of pushing down in there. All right, so let's see how much solder I have left over here. 1, 2, 3. Probably only need 2 of those, I'm guessing. But I'll keep the other one handy in case I need it. File this flat on the bottom. You get kind of a nice shiny bottom. You can see how he's going to sit in there now. Looks pretty good on the size. Now we have to figure out the size of this thing. I was thinking I was going to make about a 9. This is what I think I measured. I cut a strip about as wide as it needs to be. I don't want this to get too narrow on either side of it, so I want to make sure it's wide enough. And with wide band rings, you need a little bit more on the size. So if I make a 9, it's going to end up being a smaller ring. But traditionally, if I was going to make a 9 itself, I'd add about 1/8 of an inch like that anyway. I'm figuring though, between that, I think we need to go bigger. The more I think about it, otherwise it's because I'm going to make this double thick on the 18 gauge sheet, and that's going to make the inside diameter even smaller because we're measuring around this with something that is basically 2-dimensional, and that's going to be quite thick, and so that's going to have an effect on the overall inside diameter. And so I'm going to make it more like a 10, so I'm going to add a little more on that in the hopes that I end up somewhere around an 8, maybe. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. It's kind of an experiment for me. I've never made one quite like this, so it'll be a fun experiment. So I have some 18 gauge sheet here. Kind of cut a straight edge off of one side here so that I could cut these off. Doesn't do a very good 90 degree if you don't hold it tight against the piece. And if I want it to be about that wide, kind of eyeball it like that. So that'll be the first one. And then after I cut that one off, I'll measure for a second one so I get it pretty close. This one ended up being about a little more than 3/8 of an inch, or if you're a metric person, 11.5 millimeters. Let's see how straight I can get it. We'll see if I can cut a straight line now. do want is I want it to be pretty flat. Okay. I'm just going to cut this off here too. Don't move. Let's see where we are compared to what I drew here. It's a little bit wider, which is good. I'd rather be a little wider than too narrow. Because I'll probably need to neaten up the edges anyway. So, see, that's a little bit wider. Okay, so let's see if we can. I'm going to spend a little more time getting these nice and flat, and then we'll solder it together. This one's still got some waviness to it. It's probably different for everybody, but I get a lot of people telling me that they like to pound things flat, and I've found it to be much easier to just use the pliers to kind of flatten things out. Sort of cathartic to pound things flat, but a lot of times the bounce that you get back on it keeps it from ever getting really flat. For this though, it just needs to be pretty close, I think, because once those get hot with some solder between them, they'll stick together just like glue. So let's do that and see how it goes. You can see they're not exactly the same, and that's fine, because after I solder them together, I'll file them so they're exactly the same. And hopefully you won't be able to even tell that it was once two pieces, but I'm going to use gratuitous solder on this, so I'd rather have too much than some gap somewhere. If it oozes out the side, so much the better. I can file it off. That should probably be enough. One can hope. For something like this, you want to make sure it's nice and crusty and there's no spots where you didn't get any flux. So I'm just basically, what this is called, sweat soldering. I'll be pre-melting the solder on this one here, and then after I take the torch away, then I'll be able to flip this over, even though it solidifies, set it on top, and then reheat the whole thing till it flows again, and then it should stick the two together. So. Sometimes I heat from the bottom in order to get the sheet hot more quickly. The top side gets hot pretty quick, but the bottom side is not getting the flame directly, so we'll speed things up a little bit. So you want to get them to melt, but not just melt, you want them to kind of puddle nicely. So keep heating it till it's not a lumpy thing anymore, it's more flattened out. Okay. So I'm going to throw one more on there. Got a gap in the middle here, maybe two. Just adding a couple more. Okay. So now you may try to slide around a little bit, so I'm going to keep my tweezers in my hands when I'm doing this, when I get it to flow again. I can nudge it back into place. I said tweezers, but I guess I kept my pick in my hand. See how our seams look. Looks pretty good to me. Now I just need to spend a little time filing. Make sure that I stay in the lines. Okay, so I'm not going to make you watch me file the entire time, but basically that's what's going to happen. Okay, that was a lot of filing to get that nice and neat, but I think I got it pretty symmetrical. So I think in the next step, let's find the center of it. We can probably do that if we scribe a line from corner to corner. Now let's see how close we were to the center. This is about the center right here. As long as we're close, I think we're good. So I need to mark out that sort of lozenge shaped, this part right here, while it's flat. And then, but I can't make it so wide that this doesn't fit in there nicely. So I don't want to get too crazy. I like it to fit in there nice and snug. Make a mark with a pencil better, maybe. Like that. I think I wanted it roughly 3 times as long. So this is about 1/4 inch, or I think we decided it was 6 millimeters. 3/4 of an inch with the center of that centered here. Should be 3/8. Go right about there. So I think our next step is to drill a hole and try and file a nice slot in there. This is my hardest part because I'm not super good at sawing, because it's really not my favorite thing to do, but we'll give it a shot. Hopefully I'll at least make it so that it's salvageable with the file. We'll see though. Okay, so I'm over at my area where I usually saw. The saw blade all already in here, but I'm going to have to pull it out and then slide it through the hole that we drill. There we go. If you're doing this, that's going to be real hot. So let it cool down for a bit. Wow, I did it without breaking the blade. That's unusual. Okay, let's go back and clean that up. Okay, so I'm going to be spending a lot of time with my jeweler's file. It's braced against the table, getting that straight. Mostly at this point I'm trying to get these two lines parallel and parallel with the sides, or at least as close as I can get them. It's a little wider on this side, so I'm taking more off on this side than the other side, but I did a little irregular sawing here, so it's not unsurprising since sawing is, like I said, not my strongest suit. Just kind of like that. And I don't think I better file it too much wider. I might take, this side's a little wider than that one, so I'm going to take that down a bit. I'm going to take it over to the Dremel just for a second. And that's not too terrible from the top, so I don't care so much how it looks from the bottom, but it needs to at least be pretty neat from the top. So I think I'm going to make this into a band now. The solder that we have between the two sheets is going to make it a little bit of a bear to bend in spots. It's already thick. It'll be easier to bend where these are. I may have to do some manual bending. This. At this point I'm going to anneal it, I think. See if I can't soften it up just a skosh. So now I'm going to push them past each other a bit. This is a pretty heavy ring. It takes a while to get this up to temperature. Okay, I'll let that sit in the pickle for a little bit. I'm going to go eat something, and then we'll come back and solder that bezel in, and then we'll pickle it again, and then we'll polish it. Set the stone. Back post-snack, so I think I'm going to do a little filing to clean this up, and then we'll round it out, and we'll solder that bezel in. So again, lots of filing on this one. I'm going to turn this a little this way. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I usually try and do the hammering on the table, but it makes so much noise and it doesn't effectively show how I actually do it, so I hope I'm in frame here. I usually set it on my knee like this. goal when I do solder it in here is going to be to get it where there's very little bezel sticking up above, and also get it centered pretty well, which is always a guessing game with me. So, but actually that fits in there snugly pretty well. So I'm going to do a little Dremel cleanup on the inside. See if I can't get it a little rounder. I did a little significant dremeling and filing to get it sort of cleaned up, and I think it's looking pretty good. So I was fortunate in that it's snug in here. Okay, I kind of want to get it pretty close to the center because the human eye can usually distinguish differences like that. Now I want to set this on my third hand so that neither the band nor the bezel can fall out. To do that, I'm just going to balance it on there like that. After I spread it open a little bit with my tweezers, that way it can't fall off either of them. So, and then I'll just, I'm going to pick solder a little bit on this side, a little bit on this side, and then we'll pickle it, and then we'll likely polish it a lot before we set the stone. I normally polish last, but for videos it seems to make sense to get it all cleaned up a little bit so you can see what's going on better. Now there's an awful lot of mass in this band, and so most of the heating is going to have to take place on the lower part here. Even though we're soldering the piece in up at the top, it'll take very little time for that bezel to get up to 1450 degrees. But the band is a different story. That's going to take quite a while. So I'm just going to kind of avoid the bezel even. Pick up some solder there. I'm actually going to kind of pick on the inside of the band here so I don't get a big sloppy mess on top that I have to clean up. I'll let that pickle for a while. Okay, did a lot of cleanup beforehand, and like I said, normally I polish last, but for the sake of these videos, it kind of makes sense a lot of times to get things cleaned up so you can see what's going on a little better. Okay, get rid of a little polishing compound that was left in there. Just got to set this stone now. Sit on. Now I'm just going to gently try to push these sides over the top just slightly as you go straight across from each other, and then do it, the opposite way, straight across from each other. So we're getting even pressure from each side. These kind of stones have a tendency, if you push too hard on one side, they'll tip up, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Actually do a little burnishing. See if we got it secure. Little pokes from behind. Okay, I'll probably go back and do a little light finish polishing, but that's our ring. So I'll take some pictures of it and put it at the end of the video. It's a slot ring video. I hope you found it to be useful. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and subscribe to my channel. I have lots of useful content here, especially if you're a beginner silversmith. Or if you are a little bit more advanced one and you just want some inspiration for ideas, there's a lot of good idea videos here. So thanks again. And like I said before, if you want to support my channel, you can buy me a cup of coffee up there, or you can join my Patreon. So check out both of those links. All right, thanks for watching. I appreciate your coming. Happy silversmithing. Take care.